What's going on, everybody? It's Monday evening, not quite evening. I guess it depends where you are. Going on 5 o'clock here in Wisconsin as we get set for the Green Bay Packers versus the Detroit Lions. Should be a pretty fun Monday night football game. We'll get to all of that and more. Thank you for being with us here. It is, of course, Jake Senholz for Flurry Sports. We're talking a little Week 2 fantasy review and Monday night football preview. Before we get to any of that, though, I want to welcome back for the first time in a while. It's my buddy or coworker, Tanner Rohr. And
Thank you.
Tanner, first of all, how you doing? It's been a while since we talked, been a while since we've seen you. I know you got your own projects that you're working on and stuff, but how you been? Things good?
Yeah, it's been a really long time since I've talked to you. I think I messaged you a couple times during the off season, but I tried to start a podcast this year with one of my friends, and so we've been getting 15, 20 downloads an episode. So been putting some effort into that. I'm excited to be here. I really enjoyed doing the live streams every Monday and Tuesday last season. So excited to be back with you guys and talking some fantasy football.
For sure, man. You'll at least be back for Mondays and then whatever else. It's kind of a rotating cast this year. Obviously, with COVID last year, a lot of us had more free time. So I know Coach has a lot of responsibilities going on. Henry's in the middle of a potential move. I've got a lot happening. So anytime you want to hop on, you are more than welcome, man. What's the new podcast? Go ahead and plug that.
Yeah, it's the Fantasy Football Storyline. I got my Twitter handle is FF Storyline. And it's just me and one other friend. And we just kind of cover anything and everything. And you mentioned you're coming out of Wisconsin. I'm actually in Los Angeles right now, going on 3 o'clock, not 5 o'clock.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that because you said you were on Pacific time, and I know last year you were in Alabama, right? So are you graduated now, or are you just doing remote classes, or what's going on?
Yep, graduated from the University of Alabama in early May, and
just a few national championships while you were there.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. They got one my freshman year and then one last year. So I was stoked about that, and it's awesome to see Mac Jones, Devontae Smith, Najee Harris, Jalen Waddle all in the league this season. And most of them are looking pretty good already through 2 weeks of the NFL.
Well, and another big Alabama name. Let's just dive into it right here. I just wrote an article. It got published. You can see it over at flurrysports.org. But Derrick Henry, pretty much a no-show in week 1. He did have a few catches to kind of boost his fantasy stats. Without those 3 receptions, he had about 5.7 or 6.7 points, I think. His lowest total, I believe, since the middle of last season. But he bounces back this last week. 200-plus yards, 3 total touchdowns, leads all scorers, 47.5 points. And another Alabama product just keeps chugging along, keeps doing it. Derrick Henry, much like Tom Brady and all these other greats that people just want to push off the cliff sooner than they should, write them off and say, he did it for a couple of years and there's no way he can do it again this year. Kind of looks like Derrick Henry might do it again this year, huh?
No, that was a fun performance to see. Derrick Henry is one of my favorite players in the league to watch. And I mean, if any concerns that people had in week 1, I mean, it's 1 week of football, and then he comes in and does what he does in week 2 and puts up one of the best games of his career. And he's a player too that gets better as the game goes along. And the first half started out kind of slow, and I feel like a lot of fantasy players are like, he had a bad week 1. He saw the slow start to the game, and then the second half he just became Derrick Henry, and that's just what he does. He's a tank, and with Julio Jones and AJ Brown on the outside, they got pretty much 3 tanks on offense. So it's fun to watch all those guys.
Yeah, I mean, the Titans they're another team too. And even I hadn't last year, I think I had said they were going to be one of the teams to take a big step back. Obviously that didn't really happen. And they pretty much bring back everybody and add Julio Jones. It looked pretty ugly for them in week 1, but obviously it was a pretty good win last week. And the Titans are just loaded, man. They got a bunch of beasts, a bunch of huge names, a bunch of Alabama guys, not that they got Julio too. I love the Titans after seeing what I saw the first week and then seeing how they rebounded. I believe I took them to win their division at only minus 115. And I don't really know who's going to compete with them. The Colts looked pretty decent, but fantasy-wise, regular football-wise, I like the Titans a lot this year. We're kind of just going to freelance here, just talk a little bit about whatever comes to our minds. So if you guys have any questions or you want us to talk about any player specifically, we're not going to be on for super long today, maybe 30 minutes or so, but please go ahead and throw them in the chat or tweet them at us. I am not Zach Bruner. I'm Jake Sunholz at Sunholz on Sport, and you can hit me up there. You can hit me up on the Twitter, the Flurry Twitter, and then Tanner as well. Get your questions in before we hop off here. But Tanner, obviously we've seen 2 weeks. You're a big fantasy football head. Is there anybody that has really surprised or really disappointed you thus far throughout 2 weeks of the season? Obviously, like you said, it's early in the season. You can only take it 1 week at a time. Guys like Derrick Henry catapulted himself to the front of all fantasy scores. Seemingly, he's the number 1 running back and just number 4 overall by a very slim margin. And he was able to do that in just 1 week. So we know fantasy is very much a week-to-week type thing. But through the first 2 weeks, anybody really stick out to you as in a good way or a bad way?
Yeah, I would say Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp were 2 players who I could not wait to watch the season. And you saw with the Rams, the capital they gave up to go and get Stafford. And I think Sean McVay is actually in love with Matthew Stafford right now. Like, just the way he's like looking at him, and every time they show him on the sidelines in a game, it feels like they're just so excited to have Stafford there. And in that game this past week, it felt like there was like a 3rd and 18 that they didn't convert, but they almost did and was right there. And it just felt like 10 to 20 yard chunk plays were just easy to come by consistently. So I was excited all off season to see Stafford there. And then, and as a byproduct of that, I loved Cooper Kupp too. Because I just think Cooper Kupp is a really, really good player who was going to be so necessary for this offense. And based on what you've seen Cooper Kupp do through 2 weeks now, he's the number 1 overall fantasy wide receiver.
He's the number 1 fantasy scorer outside of Kyler Murray. So any position player, he's the number 1 scorer.
Dang. I love watching Cooper Kupp play. Like, I love the yards after the catch that he gets. And like, I always knew that Kupp and Woods were some of the best players in yards like after the catch. And then in that first Monday night football game or Sunday night football game, maybe against the Rams and the Bears, like they showed that Kupp and Woods were number 1 and 3 since they've like been on the team in the last 2-3 seasons. So I was like, oh, well, he actually is number 1. I thought he was good, but the stats really do back it up. So like if you drafted Cooper Kupp, I think it's good. He's going to be like a potential fantasy MVP by the time the season comes to an end.
Oh, for sure. Maybe even, if he doesn't go to a quarterback, could he be offensive player of the year type candidate? It's insane how undervalued Cooper Kupp was. I mean, we saw what he was able to do and the target share that he got with Jared Goff there. And I think one of the big reasons, Jared Goff is not, he's not a bad quarterback. He can throw the ball. We saw him do some nice things with the Lions already. Obviously, he went to a Super Bowl with the Rams, but Jared Goff, even on his best day, is not half of Matthew Stafford on his best day. And I think where Woods and Kupp, a lot of those numbers came from is the fact that they would catch the ball, 4 to 7 yards downfield, and they would turn that into a 25-plus yard gain. Now with Matthew Stafford, they don't catch the ball for, 30, 40 yards down the field, and they're still picking up an additional 20 yards on the end of that. So it really is just a complete revolution going on out in Los Angeles. I think it was Chris Collinsworth said it best where, Sean McVay took over the head coaching position at 30 years old, or he was almost 31, but he was 30 years old. And in comes Jared Goff, who's a project, a young quarterback, maybe not, as advanced of a football mind. So you got a 30-year-old quarterback coaching a somewhat of a project quarterback. Well, now 4 or 5 years down the road, Sean McVay is that much better, that much more intelligent as a head coach. And now he's got a partner. Chris Collinsworth said, versus it's a student versus a partner. Matthew Stafford brings a ton of experience, a ton of knowledge, toughness. He opens up that playbook. I absolutely love the Los Angeles Rams this year. I took Stafford for most passing touchdowns, most passing yards, and I took him MVP. And Cooper Kupp was, I believe his ADP was 3 or 4 positions lower than Robert Woods.
Yeah, it was.
So he was an absolute steal. I'm sure you targeted him in a few leagues. I tried to get him in every league that I possibly could. Cooper Kupp has posted over 60 points in in 2 weeks across to start this season. Robert Woods just 24. So Cooper Kupp so far 3 times the return of Robert Woods, and you were probably able to get him a little bit further down the board. That's just criminal in my mind. Like I don't know how people had Cooper Kupp so low.
No, I have a league where I got Cooper Kupp in 2 or 3 leagues. But I have a league where I took Metcalf and AJ Brown in rounds 2 and 3. Then I followed it up with Cooper Kupp in round 4. So those are my wide receivers 1, 2, and 3, and I'm loving my team in that league right now.
Yeah, you're sitting pretty in that one for sure. So Kupp, and for some reason I don't know how, but I'm looking at my ESPN app, and he's only rostered in 98% of leagues. You know, most of the time big name players are 99.9. There's still 2% of leagues that Cooper Kupp's not even rostered out there. I don't know what leagues those are or who's playing in them, but if you happen to be in one of those leagues, I don't know, maybe go out and hit the waiver wire immediately. But he's the number 1 ranked player, averaging 30.3 points across these 2 weeks. I mean, we could talk Cooper Kupp for days here, but obviously he's going to be a top. I'd say even if he regresses a little bit, I don't see a way that he falls outside like the top 5 fantasy scoring wide receivers for the season. Do you?
I mean, hitting that top 5 is tough, but like I feel like he's going to contend for that, like for sure. I think his volume is going to be so dependable on a week-to-week basis.
That's the key. It's the volume share. You know, even he's not necessarily going to put up 100+ yards every single week, but he might catch 10 balls every single week, or 8 to 10 balls, and he's always got that yard after catch too. So I think top 5, you know, we're only 2 weeks into the season, but I think top 5 is definitely not out of the realm of possibility. He's probably going to shoot up the board and then maybe be overdrafted next year, depending on what the Rams do. I don't know, but Cooper Kupp, man, he's somebody that you love to have this season. So that was somebody that you brought up, Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford. Let's keep rolling. Whatever's on Tanner's brain here. Who else have you liked or disliked?
Yeah, so I got a bunch of names written down that had like poor and good performances this week. I mean, you brought up Kyler Murray already, and being a Cardinals fan, I mean, you saw Kyler be the number 1 quarterback through like the first 13 weeks last season, and then Josh Allen ended up passing him up, and Kyler kind of got hurt, and then the end of the season, it didn't finish like that strongly. And I feel like you're seeing Kyler pick up exactly where he left off last year, plus even more with the new weapons that they brought into the offense. Like Rondale Moore has looked good. And then you got AJ Green on the outside. Christian Kirk can now play in the slot, which he was kind of forced to play outside last year because of the receivers that they had. And man, it's been fun 2 weeks in a row for Kyler Murray and that whole Cardinals offense.
He's just incredible to watch, dude. I mean, Cardinals fan or not, he's mind-blowing. He's so good. And I think that he's going to be able to do this like sustainably too, because he's not the type of quarterback where like, you know, he's running around and then he ends up getting clipped or like takes these head on. He's just so fast and shifty that I don't see, as long as his legs don't give out, you know, as long as he can like keep that agility and that ability to cut on a dime, like nobody can touch him, let alone like level him. So I feel like, you know, that type of quarterback play shouldn't really be sustainable over an entire career. But I feel like Kyler Murray should be able to get, you know, barring any major injury, I don't see why he can't do this for years and years and years to come. Like that, he plays in the most competitive division in football probably, and he's holding his own and standing out amongst those games. So you got to give all the credit in the world to him.
Yeah, absolutely. And like they have such a fast pace of play, and even when Kyler, like I think Kyler's biggest weakness is probably he makes some bad interception decisions sometimes, but it's not that bad for fantasy because you don't get penalized really for it. And then so then the other team's offense gets the ball, does what they do with it, and then the Cardinals get the ball right back. And it's just like feels like free fantasy points with Kyler Murray in your lineup.
Yeah, a player like that, you can afford, -2 here, -2 there. He's still gonna, be a top quarterback for the week. Chandler Jones too. I had him in my dynasty league on my bench. I think I started Shaq Barrett instead. So of course, naturally, I'm like, well, 56 points. I got to start him week 2, and he had a pretty quiet week 2. But after going off for 5 sacks, I think you deserve to. I think you deserve to be gifted the benefit of the doubt for at least 1 week, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, Chandler 5 sacks, and was it the first half? I think he had 3 in the first quarter. Yeah, he's such a good player. It's nice that he's healthy this season.
Yeah. The Cardinals are going to be. That NFC West is every single game that's played in that division. You're going to want to watch. It's going to be a very, very fun division in football, and it's going to be one of those years where one team deserves to be in the playoffs. Probably is better than the last couple seeds of teams that are going to be in the NFC, but they're just by happenstance probably not going to make it. Hopefully your Cardinals aren't the one that ends up in that position, but who knows? So that's some Kyler Murray talk. Obviously, I believe he was. It's like him and Josh Allen were like the top 2 drafted quarterbacks pretty much in any league anywhere this year. So, him being this good, less of a surprise and more of a, not really a relief, but just fantasy owners obviously glad that it's working out the way it's supposed to. So a couple of names there with real positive impacts on your fantasy roster. How about a negative impact? We got somebody that's been letting you down here.
Yeah, well, in a league, I've actually started Brandon Ayuk 2 weeks in a row, even despite the goose in week 1. Everybody was like, you can't trust him going into week 2, and I started him in 2 leagues this week because I'm like, I know he's an amazing player, and I really thought that in week 1 he was sort of nursing that hamstring injury. But then, he comes out with 1 catch this past week. So he's a player that I don't think you can trust at all until he shows you that he can do it. And the Niners, just in general, have been, outside of Deebo Samuel, they don't really have any fantasy options that look like are consistent and dependable at the moment. So, you had Elijah Mitchell. People spent a bunch of capital on their waiver wire this week to go and get him, and he had 19 touches this week. Didn't do a lot with them, and the Niners offense didn't really operate well in general this week. So, I feel like you have to be happy with the 19 touches that he got, 17 carries and 2 receptions. But it's hard to trust a Niners player at the moment outside of Deebo. You can absolutely trust Kittle, I think, going forward, but Kittle has given you 2 disappointing performances so far.
Yeah, and Kittle, I'm glad you brought him up because, he was somebody who throughout the past couple of seasons, right there, a viable option as a top 10 pick. First tight end off the board it was pick your poison with him or Travis Kelce, and all of a sudden this year he's like sliding into the 3rd. I saw him even go in the 4th round behind guys obviously like Darren Waller, who's having a really good season, Travis Kelce, but tight end is not deep at all yet. Kittle was still sliding that far. It really kind of surprised me, but maybe from what we've seen these first couple of weeks, it shouldn't have. Obviously, we all know Kittle is a phenomenal real-life football player. But maybe
probably the best tight end in the league.
Yeah, probably best pure tight end in the league. And Travis Kelce is just schemed so well. Like, he gets open and everything just comes so easy for him. Whereas, Kittle kind of gets in the mud a little bit more, it seems, and he busts through some tackles, breaks through some extra coverage. Like, he just does all that extra stuff that you want your pass catching tight end to do. But maybe it results in a little bit less overall yardage, less touchdown opportunities. But another thing, or another player rather, on San Francisco that was supposed to be like a sneaky little nugget to play off of your actually never mind, you used to be FF Nugget.
Yeah, no, I switched it up.
switch to the storyline, which is good. You always got to promote yourself, promote your projects. But Tanner used to be FF Nuggets, so I tried to make a little joke there. But somebody that was maybe supposed to be a sneaky like ton of value this year was Raheem Mostert, and obviously that didn't go anywhere as he played a couple of snaps and ended up done for the season. I know when Zach and I were talking, he got some inside info that Ayuk maybe was going to be a disappointment this year. Deebo Samuel and Raheem Mostert were going to be kind of like the two guys there. And again, Mostert kind of climbed the depth chart ranks a little bit, and because of injuries and other stuff, was going to have an opportunity to be number one guy. San Francisco really liked him, but obviously not going to be playing the rest of the season. So I completely agree with you. If you don't have Deebo Samuel on your bench right now, I don't really want stock in anybody on the 49ers, including both their quarterbacks right now.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Mostert because he was actually a player that I loved because he was getting drafted in the 8th, 9th round. And the way way down there. And the way I saw it was he's a great player and a great rushing system who is at the top of the depth chart. And I was like, he's going to come in week 1 against the Lions and put up over 100 yards rushing and a touchdown. And all of a sudden he's going to be in everybody's starting lineup come week 2. And sadly, I had him in a lot of leagues, and I knew the injury history, so I was like, maybe he gets me a month of football and then he's out. Sure. But instead, he got me 2 carries. It was a good 2 carries. It was 2 for 20, but that's all I got from him for the season.
Yeah, sad. Because I think, the people that really dig deep into fantasy football, like you, like Zach, Mostert he jumped off the page as a guy that you can get way later than you should be able to. And a guy that even if he does only give you a month or two of good football, help build a little cushion, build a little lead in your league. But maybe next year, we'll see. Somebody else that really, really surprised me, just as I'm looking through a list of names here, and they call him Teddy Covers for a reason. He's 2-0 on the season, 2-0 against the spread. Teddy Bridgewater, man, he's the number 10 ranked quarterback in fantasy through 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think Bridgewater is a good quarterback, and I was glad that he won the starting job over Drew Lock. And I think he's a quarterback. The Broncos have a lot of good pieces. They're just a good overall team. Like their defense is really solid. Couple good running backs with some good receiving options, and they were great. And all they needed was a quarterback. And I feel like Teddy Bridgewater is serviceable and can absolutely do that. And like he's made plays so far through 2 weeks when you watch him and you're like, there's no way Drew Lock would have made that play. Yeah. Then you can just see the visual difference on the field immediately, the impact that he makes for that team.
Well, there's probably plays that he didn't make that Drew Lock would have made too. So, there's two sides to that coin where he's making plays that wouldn't have been made by Drew Lock just because he's not capable. And then he's also not making plays that Drew Lock maybe would have made because he's a more experienced, a little bit more cerebral, take less of a chance type quarterback. But like I said, 2-0 against the spread, 2-0 on the season. You got to be happy right now with Teddy Bridgewater if you are a Broncos fan. And just another name to throw it out there. I know Zach and I talked about him last Monday, so I really doubt he's still hanging out in your leagues. But Tim Patrick comes in. Going to play a bigger role now with the absence of Jerry Jeudy. And Patrick comes in, already had a touchdown last week. So if you like Teddy Bridgewater, if you're in a league that, maybe it's a little bit deeper and you're looking for a name, or maybe it's an 8 or 10 man league and you're just unhappy with a couple of the guys on your bench, Tim Patrick's definitely one to consider.
Yeah, and going off the Broncos, Courtland Sutton, I think really, really jumped out to me this week because Jerry Jeudy going down, that Courtland Sutton has to step up. You've seen the talent of Courtland Sutton 2 years ago. Like he broke out in the NFL, and no doubt he was a great NFL receiver. But because like a year is a very, very long time for people, and he was going really late in fantasy drafts, and then he came out last week, had 1 catch, and then going into week 2, it's like there was big question marks there. But it was either 11 or 12 targets. It was 9 catches for 159 yards. Just a great week. He was playing Jacksonville, But like it was just really positive to see a player that hasn't played football in so long come and just ball out like he did.
Yeah, I love those returns, especially when they go well. And playing alongside a quarterback too that had one of the most epic returns of all time. Maybe not Alex Smith worthy, but Teddy Bridgewater. I mean, imagine if he never had to take 2.5, 3 years off of football. Imagine if the Vikings had, continued to develop and put a team around him, and he didn't have to go almost 4 calendar years without getting a chance to be under center as a starting quarterback. I mean, Teddy Bridgewater is already very, very good. I can only imagine how much better he would have been without that catastrophic knee injury. I've got 2 more names to throw at you, and then maybe we'll end with 1 or 2 more names that you want to talk about, preview the Monday Night Football game, and then we're going to hop off here as I know we both have very busy evenings. But if you like hanging out with us, again, you still got time to get some questions in, so please do that if you got any. But if you like hanging out with us, make sure you come back every Monday night. It's going to be me and Tanner and maybe a couple other rotating guest characters here. But we're going to be doing this every Monday. Hopefully we'll get a set time. If not, sometimes you get us early, sometimes you get us late. But anyway, thanks for hanging out here with us. And make sure you check out all the written content too over at flurrysports.org. My final 2 names I want to toss at you here, Tanner. He was my keeper in my big money keeper league. We only get 1. It has to be a guy you took in the 3rd round or later. I kept Antonio Gibson. So far, pretty much a whole lot of nothing. Obviously, there's been some shakeups. Taylor Heineke had to come in halfway through that first week. I personally like Taylor Heineke a lot. That's not really fantasy football related, and I did write an extensive article, which you can also find over at flurrysports.org. But, man, J.D. McKissic comes in last week, puts up almost 21 points, steals a touchdown. Should I be concerned here? I mean, I did cuff Gibson with McKissic in as many leagues as I could. It didn't work out in all of them. But I kept him as a keeper, and barely a double-digit performance in week 1 and a 9.3 performance last week. What do you got for me on Antonio Gibson here? Should I continue to be worried?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I feel like it comes down to watching the player on the field, because it hasn't been good for fantasy-wise for 2 weeks in a row now. And to me, Antonio Gibson looks completely like the player that he was last season. He's been getting a bunch of carries every week. And to me, he flashes every time he touches the ball, and it hasn't worked out for fantasy, but I wouldn't be worried about Gibson. I love the usage he's got. And it's interesting because like you said, McKissic came in. I think McKissic even had like his career high in receiving yards in that game, or it was like his receptions, or it was something like that. But it was the complete opposite in week 1, where Gibson got all the work and like McKissic wasn't even on the field. And I know Gibson had the AC joint sprain going into that game, and it was a quick turnaround. It was a Thursday night game. So maybe that's why you saw McKissic get a little bit more work in that game. But McKissic is no doubt a good pass-catching running back. So, I mean, you're not going to see Gibson in there all of the time. But I think Gibson's a great player. And I think Washington's offense, there's going to be a little bit to be desired there. But it seems like that offense is really going to run through Gibson. So, like, I would feel comfortable with Gibson going forward.
It's a lot of the same last year too, where like both of them, some weeks, both of them had monster weeks. Other weeks, both of them were average. Some weeks, all the work went to one guy or the other. It is really tough. But McKissic had like 85 receptions last year, something like that. I'm not quite sure he's going to get anywhere near that total this year. And personally, I'm hoping, Gibson kind of solidifies himself as the true number 1 go-to guy there. I like how he looks when he plays too. That's part of the reason I kept him. And, he had a career year last year. I'm just hoping things start to turn around a little bit over in Washington. We do have a question here from Drew. So thank you for participating and watching here, Drew. He said, question for you. My starting wide receivers in a half-point PPR are CeeDee Lamb, Scary Terry, DJ Moore, Julio Jones, Cortland Sutton, and Corey Davis. First of all, pretty good receiving core, I got to say.
That's not too bad.
Not too bad at all, which leads me into the next part of his question. He said, would you trade Julio and Sutton for DK Metcalf or A.J. Brown? There's 2 ways to look at this. CeeDee Lamb, Terry McLaurin, probably your top two guys are going to start almost every single week, which means you're going to have to go about this either with a myriad of guys that you can choose from each and every week, depending on their matchup, depending on, if they've had a good couple weeks prior, whatever. Corey Davis, I think is going to be fine. We're not going to have Zach Wilson 4 interception game every single week. They don't play the Patriots every week. I think Corey Davis is going to be fine. Tanner just told you how much he likes Cortland Sutton, and Julio Jones is a guy that obviously can get it done. And it's gonna be streaky for him. It has been for a number of years. So what do you trade Julio and Sutton for DK Metcalf and AJ Brown? I personally like that roster you've got a lot, and I like having the options. Yeah, if you can trade those two guys straight up for one of those two, maybe, that's probably not a bad idea. But you did say you have a double flex league, so you're getting rid of 2 reliable guys to bring in 1 in a double flex league. I don't know. What do you think here? Tanner? I probably would rather have DK Metcalf than AJ Brown if you're going to make that trade, but I'd like to hear your thoughts.
So, yeah, I totally agree with you. I would rather have DK over AJ Brown, especially in this trade, because, you got Julio. You got AJ Brown's teammate Julio on the other side for Tennessee. And then when you add in Sutton to get the receiver that's on the same team, I don't know. It feels like you're giving up too much in that scenario. But so I for sure wouldn't do it for AJ Brown. For DK, DK had 11 targets this last week. I feel like his blow-up game is coming in week 3. I don't remember who Seattle plays, but I know it's actually Minnesota. It's a really good matchup. I feel like his explosion game is coming this week. And that's your Julio and Sutton to upgrade a receiver. It's definitely given up a lot, but I think this roster with how many receivers there are is definitely a team where I would consider doing it. Man, I love DK. I love that he's attached to Russell Wilson. I love the way the Seahawks look so far. So, this is a tough one. I think if you trade Julio and Sutton for DK, I see you being happy with it, but I also see you being happy keeping Julio and Sutton. So, I want to give you a for sure answer, but right. I like all 3 guys in the trade. So,
well, the other thing to keep in mind about DK too is it always seems like when Tyler Lockett goes off, people start to worry about DK because it's like, oh, Lockett's going to reestablish himself, or Lockett has always been Russell Wilson's favorite target, so it's going to make DK suffer. I just don't think that's the case. We've seen Tyler Lockett almost every year he's been in the league just go off for 40 or 50 a couple times throughout the year, but then he has really average numbers a good majority of the year as well. The other thing that you got to really consider there is you're in a double flex league. So if you do make the trade and get it done for DK, you still are working with Corey Davis and DJ Moore as your extra guys. I do feel pretty good about that. So if you can pull that trade off, I would say do it for DK. But you're certainly not in a bad position with Sutton and Julio. Julio, you're probably going to start the least, but between Sutton, Moore, and Corey Davis, I feel like you can make up just as many points as DK is going to get you, or probably more on a week-to-week basis. Those guys should be putting up 10-plus points on average a week, and that would mean DK has to score between 20 and 25 every single week just to equal the same production. And you are able to start more people in a double flex league, obviously. So I don't know. Take it for what you will. I think Tanner and I are both in agreement here. If you're going to do the trade, do it for DK. But I really don't think you're in a bad position overall either way. Oh, and we got some spam comments going on here.
See how many this guy can bring in.
Yeah, right. Hey, if you got a fantasy question, we'd love to hear it. So I think our final analysis is, maybe make that trade for DK. If the other person is all good, I'd say roll with it. If the other person wants any of those other receivers or anything more, I just don't think it's worth it. I think you can make up those points through your myriad of wide receivers there. And you might miss out on a monster week or 2 from DK, but overall, I think your values there and your point totals should kind of level out. But thank you for the questions. and good luck the rest of the season. We are running low on time, so Tanner, give me one more person, the person you most want to talk about, good or bad. Then we'll do a quick preview on Monday Night Football, and we'll hop off.
Yeah, sure. I'll talk about Ezekiel Elliott, who people aren't too happy with through 2 weeks now. And I've talked a lot about him on my podcast just because I feel like Zeke is 70% of the player that he was his first couple years in the league. And he's had a couple disappointing performances to start. And I just think Tony Pollard's legit. Like I love Tony Pollard, like coming into the season. I have Tony Pollard, I think, on every single team. And because of the Raheem Mostert injury, I was forced to start Tony Pollard, but it ended up being a great thing. I feel like that offense used to be, the identity was Zeke, but with Dak and those receivers, I mean, part of me, like, I just can't shake the feeling that offense is better with Tony Pollard on the field, because Tony Pollard, he's faster. I think he's more explosive, and he's a better pass catcher. So, I mean, this week you saw Zeke get 16 carries. You saw Tony Pollard with 13 carries. And I just think your expectations for Zeke shouldn't have been he's going to be a top 3 running back come season end. I think he's a very dependable running back 1. I just don't think he brings you the upside that somebody like Derrick Henry does, or Dalvin Cook does, or Christian McCaffrey does. But I think he's viewed that way by a lot of people. But ultimately, Tony Pollard is going to earn touches in that offense because he's a great player. So I think in games where the Cowboys are ahead and they need to run the ball, I think you're going to see great games from Zeke. But I also think you're going to see some, like, he's just not going to be quite the player that a lot of people hoped that he was going to be.
No, I 100% agree. I mean, people are holding on to what he was when he very first came into the league. Obviously, he still carries all the potential in the world, but we just haven't seen it. And I think he's going to find a role within the team and become effective that way, and not necessarily be the top 3 fantasy standout back. Like you said, I don't think he belongs in the category of Christian McCaffrey and Derrick Henry, even Dalvin Cook. Like, I just don't think he belongs with those guys anymore, yet he's still getting drafted that high. You know, people are still holding on to hopes like he is one of those guys. Tony Pollard, I think people were on Tony Pollard few and far between last year, but what you just said is becoming a pretty popular take, that, like, hey, just because he plays behind Zeke doesn't mean that this guy isn't really, really good. It's crazy to me that we've seen the Cowboys get into this situation multiple times now. I mean, if you think back, half a decade ago, they had to choose between DeMarco Murray, Dez Bryant, and they ended up not giving the money to the running back. DeMarco Murray flounders with a few other teams, and all of a sudden he's out of the league. Now this time around, you got obviously an elite quarterback, you got a bunch of wide receiver talent, and now you have another running back. Who do you pay? This time they make a different decision. They decide to pay the running back, and it might come back to bite them. I mean, if this is the Zeke that we have in 2021, what is Zeke in 2023, 2024 going to look like? He's somebody that I do not want anywhere near my fantasy roster this year, next year. Doesn't matter. I'm out on Zeke when it comes to the fantasy world.
Yeah, I had him in Dynasty, and I traded him last season just because, I don't know. I feel like the explosiveness isn't there. Like, I just want to watch Tony Pollard touch the ball. I'm excited. And they do different things. Like, Zeke can really pound the ball and, like, grind out the clock. And I mean, like you said, he doesn't belong with Derrick Henry. I don't know. It just really bothers me that he gets compared to like a Derrick Henry based on what Derrick Henry's been able to do the last 2-3 seasons.
You just got to see it too, because I'm not, even if all of a sudden there's this like rejuvenation of Ezekiel Elliott, and the back half of the season he goes off for 20 every week and whatever, like, I just don't believe he's going to come into next season and do it again. I think there's pretty much except for situational football, which you kind of alluded to, I think there's going to be like no consistency out of Zeke. And I think that fantasy owners are going to be repeatedly disappointed in him year after year after year until he starts to slide down the draft board ultimately. to where he belongs. Who knows how long in the future that's going to take. But I don't have Zeke on a single one of my 7 rosters this season. Yes, I'm in 7 leagues, and I'm happy about it. We can talk Dallas wide receiver core maybe next week. I think there's a lot to kind of pull apart there. But before we preview Monday Night Football here, I did want to ask you, what is your level of concern with Deontay Johnson? He established himself as like the favorite target of Big Ben, the number 1 guy amongst an elite squad of wide receivers. I don't care what you say about Juju. I don't care if you don't like his TikTok antics. He's a great wide receiver.
He's a great wide receiver.
He's a great wide receiver. Chase Claypool, just a rookie last year, obviously showed what he could do. He was a touchdown machine. Yet Deante Johnson has ascended above both of those guys, putting up big numbers here throughout the first 2 weeks of the season. But injury is my big concern. Johnson missed some weeks last year. He was hobbled in week 1, and he left the field, I believe, 2 different times in week 2. What's the level of concern for Deontay? I mean, he's a player that's hard to replace.
Yeah, I feel like the sky is the limit for Deontay Johnson. Like, he was the 6th most targeted wide receiver last season. And then going into this year, I mean, he gets another year in the league of experience. And Big Ben loves him. Like, the targets that he's seen through 2 weeks is crazy. Like, he had, it was like 9 catches for 108 yards this week before he went out the game. Like, he is a league winning type wide receiver in fantasy, I think, based on where he was being drafted, and the amount of looks that he gets in that offense. And he's a super talented player. But it's crazy. It feels like every week he gets hurt. It was the same last season too. Mm-hmm. Like, every time I watch him catch the ball, he's like holding his knee in pain, and then he'll be out for half a quarter and then come back in, and then he's fine. So like, yeah, I love the player that Deontay is. I think the sky's the limit when he's in. Him being out, I think, definitely hurts that offense based on how involved he was. And I definitely think it helps Chase Claypool a lot. Well, he would probably get more looks on the offense, and he makes big plays, so it'll give him even more chances every week to make that big play.
Yeah, Johnson is just so tough, man, because it's like you got to start him because you know what he can give you if he's out there all 4 quarters. But a lot of times he'll miss an entire quarter of play because he is nursing an injury or something. Or, he'll come in and he'll get you 4 or 5 points, and then he's out the remainder of the game. But you also don't want to, like, bench him with the thought that, like, hey, he might get injured, and then he doesn't get injured and he goes off for 19. Like, he's a very frustrating player, but he's a player that I sought out in almost every single league this year because he was quite a ways down the draft board considering the amount of targets that he gets and what he was able to put up last year, especially with that much competitive talent around him. But I mean, 22 targets through the first 2 weeks. As long as he's healthy, he's a game-breaking, difference-making type wide receiver. I'm glad I have him. I'm just very, very concerned every single week.
Yeah, I like the fantasy analyst in me really liked Deontay Johnson, but I didn't draft him anywhere just because, like, my heart was just not in it because he seems like he comes up hurt in so many games, so I just stayed away from it. But I mean, if he's healthy, he'll be great.
Well, and the other thing is, like, the Steelers are more likely to be cautious with him, right? Like, even if he's got an injury that shouldn't necessarily take him out of the remainder of the game, it's like we have Najee Harris, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Chase Claypool, so we don't really have to put Deontay Johnson back in this game right now, So right. It makes it much easier for the Steelers to be cautious with him, and that's going to affect you negatively as a fantasy owner as well. So Deontay Johnson, I feel like, is going to be a name that we discuss quite a bit as we roll through the season. But right now he's healthy and he's doing really well, so I am happy about that. Monday Night Football preview, real fast. Packers, Lions. Lions have this roaring comeback, no pun intended, last week against the San Francisco 49ers, who almost blow the game, or almost blow the cover, almost blew the game as well. Jamal Williams, former Packer, coming off the performance of a lifetime for him. And now he comes back, rolls back into Lambeau. But Aaron Rodgers, on the other side, coming off the worst game of his career, the biggest loss the Packers have ever suffered in a game that Aaron Rodgers has started. it's gonna be very interesting, man. The Packers and the Lions. Obviously, I'm a big NFC North guy. For some reason, the Lions are always the worst team in the NFC North, but they're the team that the Packers struggle with the most. There's a lot at play here tonight, like a lot. First game back at Lambeau. Rodgers having to redeem himself from, like I said, his worst performance of his career. Lions feeling good rolling into Lambeau. Obviously, if they could knock the Packers down to 0-2, it would be, this is essentially their Super Bowl right now. They're not a playoff bound team. Like, they're young, brand new head coach, quarterback looking to establish himself. If they can roll into Lambeau Field, knock off Aaron Rodgers, it's going to be a hell of a game tonight, man. Hell of a game.
Yeah, I got the game line here. Packers are favored by 11.5 points. Jamal Williams.
I would never touch that number. 11.5. No, thank you.
Yeah. And then Jamal Williams and Swift were kind of on the injury report throughout the week. Jamal Williams got taken off. Swift is still listed as questionable, but he's going to play in that game. And that comeback was crazy last week. I went back and watched the highlights because I was like, the game's over. And I had to go back and see just how crazy it was. And it was 41-17 at the 2-minute warning. And somehow the Lions,
incredible.
Yeah, they almost put themselves in a situation to come back and win that. And I was watching Kyle Shanahan because obviously he's faced some comebacks and been on the wrong side of it. So I was like, what is going on here? He has some type of curse. I can't believe that the Lions go into Lambeau and win the game, especially with Rodgers coming off of a bad game. I feel like the Packers are going to take care of business, and it's going to be a good game for Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones. And I feel like the Packers are going to walk away with the win. I think everybody would be shocked if something different happens.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Like, there's no way I'm putting money on the Packers to win this game because the line is just so steep. I think right now you'd have to bet somewhere between $650 and $700 just to win 100. But I am on the over. I think both these teams are going to be able to score. I think the Packers defense is bad, and the Lions put some together at the end there. I think that they're going to be able to move the ball down the field. And I know the Packers are going to be able to score on the Lions. Like, there's no way they're putting up 3 points and then come out and putting up another offensive dud. So I love the over tonight. I got it at 48.5. I believe it's still currently 49. And then I'm also on Aaron Jones anytime score. This line is an absolute steal, only -120 for Aaron Jones, who should walk into the end zone in the first quarter for sure by halftime. So I love both of those bets, but there's no way I'm laying 11.5 at the Packers tonight against the Lions. I just do not trust them. Lions obviously showed an ability to backdoor cover. So even if the Packers are up by 17 points in the fourth quarter, 11.5 point spread is not safe, never safe in the NFL when you're playing with that big of a number. But I do believe the Packers are going to take care of business and hopefully be able to put that disgusting game one behind them and move forward and be the team that they are.
I hope you're right about Aaron Jones. I feel the same way. I feel like it's going to be a big game for Aaron Jones, but I need him to outscore Robert Tonyan by 5.5 points for me to win in my dynasty league. So
that should be doable.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. But I also need him to score like less than 6 points to win in another league. So I'm not even holding out hope for that league. I'm all in on Aaron Jones having a good game and winning it for me in dynasty. So
your ideal thing is like 5.8 points out of Aaron Jones and 0 out of Bobby Tonyan.
Yeah, that would be amazing. That's the miracle.
Okay, so what you need is about a 12-yard Aaron Jones touchdown plus a fumble. I believe that would put you in the 5 to 6 point range. I don't think it's going to happen. I think he's going to put up double digits easily. I think he's going to have a big, big night. And I love him to cash that -120 bet. I think that's absolutely stealing. Don't know who the books have in charge of creating that line, but I believe it should be way, way heftier than that. So that's what I'm on, is the over. Aaron Jones, anytime touchdown scorer. And I think the Packers win this game by 10 to 12 points, but I'm certainly not going to put any money on it.
Yeah, it's going to be an exciting game for sure. I just think big Rodgers bounce back is happening.
It has to be. His record, like coming off of a loss, especially a double-digit loss, it's just mind-blowing. I think he's only lost one game coming off of a double-digit loss in his entire career. And just his record coming off of a loss in general, very, very good. Like one of the best in the NFL, one of the best ever. So I think that's pretty much it, as it is going on 6 o'clock here. Only 4:30 middle afternoon for Tanner, but he said, I know you got a lot to do. When is the podcast that you're recording today going to drop?
Yeah, so that'll probably be later in the evening, probably like at some point during the second half of the game tonight. But we usually drop Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. At least that's the schedule we're trying to get going right now.
Very nice. I like the grind, man. 4 days a week is a big commitment.
Yeah. I feel like if we keep putting consistent content out there, eventually, the listens will come.
That's the only way, unless you have a viral video and you get like plucked out of oblivion by Dave Portnoy, and all of a sudden you're working for Barstool. Like it seems like everybody kind of rises to fame nowadays. Only thing you can do is work hard, keep your head down, and those downloads will come. So definitely check out the FF Storyline podcast. And Tanner, thanks for hopping on with me tonight. I'm glad that you are back, and we'll talk to you again probably on Monday.
Yeah, just thanks again for having me on. Appreciate you reaching out to me. Excited to be here and doing this.
Of course, man. And thank you to Drew and anybody else that catches this on the replay. Definitely, obviously, it's only Monday, so we got 6 more days to talk about Week 3 fantasy. So hit us up on Twitter, send us a message, tweet us, whatever you want to do. We will definitely answer all your questions. Much, much more fantasy content coming over at flurrysports.org and right here on these same streaming channels, YouTube, Twitter, and the like, all week long. So that's going to be it here. Enjoy the Monday Night Football game. Good luck to those of you who maybe are like Tanner and you've got one player left to win your week. And we'll talk to you. Well, I personally will talk to you, I believe, on Thursday. But Tanner and I will see you again next Monday. Thanks for tuning in. This is our week 2 fantasy review and Monday Night Football preview brought to you by flurrysports.org. Go Pack, go.
Thanks.